The Interstellar Academy on Veros was a place where young beings from across the galaxy came to learn the ways of combat and strategy. Its tall buildings shone under the twin suns, and the sound of training could be heard in every corner. Alien, cadets of many shapes and sizes walked the halls with pride and confidence. Some were tall and powerful, with bodies built like stone. Some were fast and light, moving as if their feet did not even touch the ground. Many of them had been raised, since childhood, to become warriors. To them, the academy was a natural step in their path. Then there was Daniel Carter, a human, a boy from Earth, a planet that most of the galaxy did not even care to remember. When he arrived, many laughed. They looked at him and saw nothing special. He was not tall. He was not strong. He looked like an ordinary young man who had stumbled into a place far beyond his reach. Some cadets whispered that he would not last even one day. Some even placed bets on how quickly he would fail. But Daniel did not seem to care. He walked the halls with calm eyes, quiet and steady, watching everything around him. The first day of training began with combat evaluations. Cadets were paired off to fight in the practice arenas. The instructors wanted to see their skills, their speed, their courage. Daniel's name was called, and he was paired against Zirak, a reptilian warrior who stood more than a head taller than him. Zirak's body was covered in green scales, and his arms were thick as tree trunks. The other cadets cheered for Zirak before the fight even began. They were certain the human would be crushed in seconds. Daniel stepped into the arena without showing fear. His stance was calm. His eyes never left his opponent. Zirak roared and charged forward, his claws swinging in a wide arc. Everyone expected Daniel to freeze or be struck down. Instead, Daniel moved. He slipped to the side with speed that surprised the crowd. The claw passed harmlessly through the air. Zirak turned, confused, and swung again, faster this time. Daniel ducked under the strike, then stepped in close and hit with sharp precision. His hand struck a pressure point under Zirak's arm, and the reptilian's body faltered for a moment. Then Daniel used his legs to sweep Zirak off his feet. The large warrior crashed to the ground with a heavy thud. The entire arena went silent. The human stood over his fallen opponent, calm and steady, as if nothing unusual had happened. The whispers began at once. Cadets who had laughed now stared with wide eyes. Instructors exchanged looks of surprise. A human had done what few thought possible. Zirak struggled to rise, but the fight was already over. The instructors declared Daniel the winner. For the first time that day, Daniel spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. He said thank you to his opponent and walked out of the arena without looking back. The crowd did not know what to make of him. Some thought it was luck. Others believed he must have cheated. But a few began to wonder if there was more to this human than they had thought. In the days that followed, Daniel was tested again and again. The instructors wanted to know if his first fight had been a fluke. They paired him with stronger and faster cadets. His next opponent was an insectoid fighter with 4 arms, each holding a training blade. The insectoid moved fast, blades flashing, from every angle. But Daniel did not panic. He stepped back, eyes sharp, watching the pattern of strikes. Then he moved in, slipping through the attacks, striking with quick punches to the joints. The insectoid stumbled and fell. Daniel had won, again. Another day he faced a brute with thick skin and bones so strong they could break steel. This fighter attacked with raw power, swinging heavy fists that shook the ground. Daniel avoided the first strike by a hair, then let the brute's own momentum carry him forward. With one precise push, Daniel sent him crashing into the wall. The brute groaned and could not rise. Once more, Daniel stood victorious. The crowd grew quieter with each victory. They no longer laughed. They no longer bet against him. They only watched, trying to understand how a human could keep winning. One afternoon, after another round of matches, a cadet approached him. Her name was Claire Morgan. She was human too, though she had grown up on a space colony far from Earth. She was known for her discipline and sharp mind, respected by both students and instructors. Unlike the others, she did not look at Daniel with disbelief or mockery. She looked at him with curiosity. She asked him where he had learned to fight. Like that. Daniel was silent for a moment before he answered. He said Earth had a long history of conflict. He said his people had faced wars for thousands of years. They had fought with spears, swords, guns, and machines. Every generation had known struggle. Humanity had survived because they had no choice. From their history, he had learned one thing, above all else: to adapt, to endure, to fight even when defeat seemed certain. Claire listened and nodded. She understood what the others did not. Daniel's strength was not in his size or his speed. It was in his mind and his will. The academy soon arranged a special test for him. The instructors wanted to see if he could handle more than one opponent at once. They called 3 cadets into the arena to face him together. The crowd filled. The stands, eager to see the outcome. The 3 fighters stood ready, each from a different species, each known for their skill. When the signal was given, they attacked all at once. The arena shook with the force of their strikes. Daniel moved with calm focus, weaving between them. One lunged with a blade, and Daniel turned it aside with his forearm, pushing the attacker into another's path. A heavy strike aimed for Daniel's head hit one of the other fighters instead. In seconds, confusion spread among them. Daniel took advantage of every mistake. He struck one cadet low, knocking him down. He spun and dodged another attack, countering with a sharp elbow. One by one, his opponents fell. The crowd was silent again. Daniel stood alone in the center, breathing steady, his expression unchanged. The instructors had no words. The human had defeated 3 at once. That night, whispers spread through the academy like fire. Some cadets were afraid, some were jealous, some were in awe. The instructors began to debate. Was this human a rare talent, or was there something about humanity they had overlooked? For so long, humans had been dismissed as weak. Now they were faced with a truth they could not ignore. Daniel Carter had shocked everyone with combat. And, though he did not show it, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. He felt eyes on him everywhere he went. Some were filled with respect. Others were filled with fear. Deep down, he understood that what he had done had changed everything. He had shown the galaxy something it was not ready to see. And he knew the real tests were yet to come. Daniel woke the next morning to the sound of the academy's alarms that signaled the start of training. The halls were already filled with cadets moving in groups, some talking loudly, others quiet with focus. When Daniel walked past, many stared at him, their eyes following his every step. Some whispered, their voices low but sharp. Others looked at him with a mix of fear and anger. A few tried to block his path as he passed, hoping to get a reaction. But Daniel simply walked on. He did not look at them. He did not rise to their challenge. He only kept moving with calm steps. The human had become the center of attention, and the attention was heavy like a weight pressing down on him. He could feel it, but he did not show it. That day's training was different. The instructors no longer gave him simple matches. Instead, they placed him in drills that pushed the cadets to their limits. In one exercise, cadets had to fight while the floor beneath them shifted and tilted at random. Many struggled to keep their balance while trying to land blows. Daniel adapted quickly, his feet light, his stance flexible, his body moving as if he had already trained in such chaos. He struck his opponent cleanly while barely losing his footing. Another drill forced cadets to fight blindfolded, relying only on their other senses. The insectoid cadet who had lost to Daniel before faced him again, his antennae twitching as he sensed movement. Yet Daniel listened to the faintest sound, the scrape of feet on the ground, the whisper of air as a limb cut through space, and reacted before the strikes landed. He caught the insectoid's arm and brought him down. The crowd of watching cadets grew restless. Every victory was another reminder that the human could not be underestimated. Some cadets began to resent him openly. In the mess hall, voices grew louder when he entered. Plates slammed on tables, claws scratched against surfaces, tails thumped with irritation. One cadet, a broad-shouldered mammal with tusks, stood in front of him and demanded a fight outside, the rules of training. Daniel looked at him for a moment and said nothing. Then he stepped aside and walked past without raising a hand. The cadet shouted after him, but Daniel did not turn. His refusal only stirred more whispers. Some called him a coward. Others saw it as restraint, but everyone kept watching him more closely. That evening, Claire found him sitting alone at the edge of the training grounds. The suns were setting, painting the sky in red and gold while cadets finished their last exercises of the day. She sat beside him without asking. Daniel glanced at her but said nothing until she spoke. She told him that many were afraid of him now. She told him that fear could be more dangerous than open hatred. Daniel listened, his face calm as always, but his hands were tight against his knees. He finally said he had no wish to make enemies. He had only come here to learn, to train, and to prove that humans belonged in the stars as much as any other species. Claire studied him and then said quietly that proving it might cost him more than he expected. The next week, the instructors announced a new round of tests. This time it was not simple duels or group matches. The cadets would face simulated battlefield scenarios in teams. The arenas transformed into landscapes that resembled alien worlds. One scenario was a ruined city, its walls broken, its streets filled with smoke. Another was a desert with shifting dunes and blinding winds. The cadets had to fight not only their opponents but also the environment. Daniel was placed with a team that did not want him. The others looked at him with cold eyes, muttering that they would not follow a human's lead. But when the simulation began, chaos quickly broke their pride. In the ruined city, they scattered and lost track of each other. Enemy drones struck from hidden corners. One cadet panicked and was taken out. Another froze when smoke blinded him. Daniel did not waste time arguing. He moved through the streets with sharp awareness, pulling his scattered team back together, guiding them with short, clear words. His voice carried calm authority, and before long they listened without question. Under his lead, they turned the tide, moving as one, taking down the drones, using the ruins as cover. When the simulation ended, his team had achieved the highest score. The instructors recorded everything. They had wanted to see if the human skill was only in combat. Instead, they saw leadership and adaptability. Whispers spread again. Some cadets who had doubted him now began to look at him with a new kind of respect. But respect was not the only thing growing. Envy took root in others. They began to plot in secret, whispering about ways to put the human in his place. One night, when Daniel returned to his room, he found his bed torn apart, his belongings scattered across the floor. Words in an alien tongue were scratched into the wall. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, then quietly began to put his things back in order. He did not complain. He did not report it. But he knew now that the academy was no longer only a test of skill. It had become a test of survival. The following days grew more tense. Everywhere Daniel went, eyes followed. Some with admiration, some with hatred. Every sparring match was harder, every test more dangerous. But Daniel never backed down. His movements grew sharper, his focus deeper. He was not only surviving the academy, he was mastering it. And though he never spoke of it, he knew that each day he stayed ahead. He was also stepping closer to a future where the galaxy would no longer see humans as weak. The academy had set out to break him, but instead, it was shaping him into something far stronger than anyone had expected. The academy soon grew louder with talk about Daniel. His victories were no longer rare stories told in whispers. They became daily events that everyone watched closely. Some cadets began to follow him in silence, not because they liked him, but because they wanted to understand how a human could do what he was doing. Others grew bitter, their pride wounded every time he stepped into the arena and walked out without defeat. It was not long before even the instructors could no longer hide their interest. They began writing notes on his movements, recording his matches in detail and speaking about him behind closed doors. The human had become more than a curiosity. He had become a problem that no one had expected to face. The next set of trials were held inside the Great Combat Dome, the largest arena in the academy. Its walls shifted and changed with each scenario, making it a place of endless danger and surprise. On that day, the dome became a forest, filled with towering trees and thick vines. The ground was soft with moss, and the sound of hidden creatures echoed through the air. Cadets were dropped in pairs to test how they survived in hostile environments. Daniel found himself paired with a winged cadet from a race known for speed and aerial strikes. The cadet looked down at him with disdain and made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with him. When the trial began, they were attacked by simulated predators, tall creatures with sharp claws and glowing eyes. The winged cadet rushed ahead on his own, darting through the branches above, striking from the air. But he was reckless, and one of the creatures knocked him from the sky. He crashed hard, and the predators closed in. Daniel moved fast, fighting through the forest floor, striking low and hard, forcing the predators back. He reached the winged cadet and pulled him to safety, holding off the attackers until the simulation ended. The cadet, shaken and embarrassed, did not thank him, but the instructors had seen everything. They had seen that the human fought not only for himself but for others. Over the next few days, the challenges grew harder. The dome became a frozen wasteland where cadets had to battle the cold as well as each other. Then it shifted to a burning desert where water was scarce and sandstorms blinded everyone. Daniel adapted each time. He conserved his strength, moved with care, and used the environment to his advantage. When others rushed into the storm and lost their way, Daniel stayed calm, finding shelter and guiding his team through the chaos. When the cold bit into their bones, he kept moving, knowing that stillness would mean death. He survived not by brute force but by patience and focus. And in doing so, he kept his team alive. The cadets who had doubted him began to argue in whispers. Some said he was dangerous. Others said he was a leader the academy could not ignore. Slowly, opinions began to shift, though not always in his favor. In the mess hall, fights nearly broke out around him more than once. A group of cadets from a warrior species accused him of cheating, saying no human could move with such skill without hidden help. They cornered him, ready to strike. Daniel stood still, meeting their eyes without flinching, before they could move. Claire stepped between them. She warned them that if they wanted to fight Daniel, they would have to fight her too. The group backed down, not out of respect, but because they knew Claire's reputation as someone not to be crossed. Later, she told Daniel that things were getting worse. She said the academy was not only testing him now, it was watching him, studying him, and perhaps even planning for what he might become. Daniel listened quietly, his expression steady, but deep inside he felt the weight of her words. One evening, the instructors announced a new trial unlike any before. It would be a full battle simulation with 2 large teams, each made up of cadets from different species. The goal was not just survival, but victory through strategy and cooperation. Daniel was placed on one side, and as soon as teams were chosen, whispers spread again. Some groaned at the thought of having him on their side, afraid of how it might look if they failed. Others were eager to see if the human could truly lead when the scale was larger. When the trial began, the dome transformed into a vast battlefield, half jungle and half ruined city. Drones, traps, and hidden turrets were scattered across the field. The other team moved fast, striking with aggression, and Daniel's team began to fall apart under the pressure. They argued, fought without coordination, and soon they were on the edge of defeat. Daniel knew he had to act. He shouted clear orders, short and sharp, his voice carrying through the chaos. At first they ignored him, but as he moved through the battlefield, taking out turrets, guiding cadets to cover, and turning ambushes into counterattacks, they began to listen. One by one, they followed his lead until the entire team moved as a unit. The tide shifted, the battle turned. When the simulation ended, Daniel's team had claimed victory. The instructors recorded the result in silence, but the weight of their gazes said more than words. That night, the academy was alive with debate. Some cadets claimed that Daniel was dangerous, that he was changing the very balance of power among them. Others argued that he was proof that humans had been underestimated for too long. Claire found him again, her expression more serious than ever. She told him that what he had done today was not just another win. It was a statement. It had shown that a human could lead, that a human could command not only in combat but in strategy. Daniel looked at her, his face calm, but he knew she was right. He had not just won a battle. He had changed something deeper. The Academy was beginning to see him not as an accident or a curiosity, but as a force. And forces, he knew, always drew enemies. As he walked back to his quarters that night, Daniel felt the silence of the corridors pressing in on him. The Academy that had once laughed at him now watched him in silence. He could feel the shift in the air, heavy and sharp. He had proven himself again and again, but he also knew that each step forward was another step into danger. The galaxy had begun to notice, and with notice came consequences. Daniel Carter had come to the Academy to train, but now, without meaning to, he was rewriting how everyone saw his kind. And deep inside, he understood that the path ahead would only grow, harder, and far more dangerous than any simulation could prepare him for. Days at the Academy turned into weeks, and Daniel's presence became impossible to ignore. Every training ground, every arena, every simulation carried the shadow of his name. Cadets whispered it with caution, instructors spoke it with interest, and even the commanders who oversaw the Academy began to take notice. For some, he was a source of inspiration, proof that no species should be underestimated. For others, he was a threat, a disruption to the order they believed was unshakable. And for Daniel, it was a burden that grew heavier with every passing day, though he never showed it on his face. The Academy introduced survival trials that stretched across entire days and nights. Cadets were dropped into hostile environments, with nothing but their gear, and had to endure until the signal of completion. One such trial placed Daniel and a group of others into a mountain range where icy winds cut through armor and blizzards buried entire paths. Food and warmth were scarce, and many cadets struggled to stay on their feet. Daniel moved quietly, helping those who lagged behind, guiding them to shelter in caves, building fires from scraps the simulation provided. He taught others how to breathe slow to save energy, how to move together so that no one collapsed alone in the snow. When hostile drones attacked under cover of the storm, he fought with precision, not wasting a single movement. The trial ended, with nearly all of his group intact, something the instructors noted with surprise. Others had lost half their numbers. Daniel had not only survived, he had carried others through. Another trial placed cadets in a swamp filled with shifting ground, poisonous mist and creatures that hunted from the water. Some cadets panicked as the swamp pulled at their legs, dragging them under. Daniel did not panic. He moved carefully, testing the ground before stepping, pulling others free when they sank too deep. When creatures lunged from the water, he fought them with quick strikes, never lingering, always moving. His calm spread to the group around him, and soon they followed his lead without argument. When the trial ended, they looked at him not with doubt, but with something closer to trust. The human who was once mocked was becoming the one they relied on most, but with his rising presence came rising danger. One night, as Daniel returned to his quarters, he found 3 cadets waiting for him in the dark. They blocked the hallway, their faces twisted with resentment. They accused him of humiliating their people, of stealing victories that should not belong to a human. They attacked without warning, fists and claws flashing in the dim light. Daniel fought back, his movements sharp and controlled, disabling, each one without delivering more harm than needed. When they lay on the floor groaning, he simply stepped past them and entered his room. He said nothing of it to anyone. But word spread anyway, as it always did, and soon the Academy was divided even more sharply between those who admired him and those who hated him. Claire stayed close through it all. She warned him again and again that the Academy was no longer just testing his skill. It was testing his place in the galaxy. She told him that the commanders had begun to watch him more than any other cadet. Daniel listened, his calm never breaking, but inside he knew she was right. He felt it in the way the instructors' eyes lingered on him during drills, in the way commanders spoke in low tones when his name was mentioned. He knew he was being measured not as a student, but as a weapon. The Academy then staged its most ambitious trial yet, a simulation that lasted an entire week, a mock war across shifting landscapes with dozens of cadets divided into 2 armies. Supplies were limited, enemies were everywhere, and the rules were simple. One side must defeat the other. Daniel was placed in command of a small unit, many of whom doubted him at first. They spoke quietly about leaving him behind, about not following the lead of a human. But when the simulation began, the chaos of war silenced their doubts. Daniel's unit was ambushed on the first day, drones and enemy cadets striking hard from the hills. Panic surged through his group, but Daniel stood his ground. He shouted orders with a voice that cut through the noise, guiding his team into cover, countering the ambush and turning defeat into victory. From that moment on, they listened, they followed, and together, they survived. As the days passed, Daniel's unit grew stronger under his lead. He scouted the land carefully, avoided traps, and struck at enemy supply lines when they least expected it. He never wasted lives. He always found a way to turn weakness into strength. Other units began to notice. Some tried to copy his tactics, others tried to crush him directly, but each time he adapted and overcame. By the end of the week, his unit stood victorious, battered but unbroken, while many others had collapsed. The simulation ended with Daniel's name written into the record books of the Academy. When the trial was over, the commanders called a private meeting. They did not summon Daniel directly, but he could feel the weight of their decision pressing down even without hearing their words. Claire told him later that they were debating what his victories meant for the galaxy. Some saw him as hope. Others saw him as danger. And though Daniel kept his calm face as always, deep inside he knew that nothing at the Academy would ever be simple again. He had not only shocked his fellow cadets, he had shaken the very foundation of the Academy itself, and now every step forward would carry him deeper into a future where every eye in the galaxy was watching. The Academy no longer felt like a school. It felt like a stage where every move Daniel made was judged by eyes that carried the weight of entire worlds. The cadets watched him with open curiosity or hidden fear. The instructors studied him as though he were a puzzle that refused to break, and the commanders spoke his name in meetings he was never invited to. He remained calm, but inside he understood that his time as just another trainee was over. He had become something more, whether he wanted it or not. One day, an announcement came that sent a ripple through the Academy. A final trial was to be held, one that would test every cadet to their limit. It was said to be harsher than anything before, an ultimate exam that combined combat, survival, and leadership. The trial would decide who was ready to graduate and who was not. For Daniel, it was something else entirely. It was the moment when the galaxy would see whether humans were truly as weak as many believed, or something far greater. The trial began inside the largest simulation the Academy had ever run. It opened on a battlefield that stretched for miles, a broken wasteland filled with ruins, rivers of fire and skies that burned with storm clouds. Hundreds of cadets were divided into factions, each tasked with seizing control of key points and holding them until the end. It was war on a scale none of them had faced before. Daniel was placed at the head of a mixed group, many of whom still doubted him, though their eyes carried a trace of the respect he had earned. He said little, but when the trial began, his actions spoke louder than words. The battlefield erupted with chaos. Explosions shook the ground, drones swarmed overhead, and cadets clashed in waves across the ruins. Daniel moved with precision, guiding his group through the storm. He chose not to charge blindly as others did. Instead, he studied the terrain, found choke points, and turned every corner into an advantage. When his group was pinned down by heavy fire, he led a flanking maneuver that shattered the enemy's position. When they faced larger numbers, he broke them apart with ambushes and traps. His leadership turned panic into discipline, and slowly his group rose above the chaos. But victory came at a price. As the trial stretched on, Daniel's group began to suffer losses. Some cadets were pulled from the simulation when their suits registered heavy damage, leaving fewer and fewer fighters at his side. The other factions saw his success and turned their focus on him, striking with overwhelming force. It seemed as though the human would finally be broken. Yet Daniel adapted again. He ordered retreats when needed, regrouped when others would have panicked, and struck only when the moment was right. His group endured, and against all odds, they continued to push forward. At one point, Daniel found himself face to face with a rival commander, a towering cadet from a warrior species that had mocked him since the first day. Their fight was fierce, brutal, and watched by dozens of others. The warrior struck with speed and strength, each blow meant to end the fight quickly. But Daniel stayed calm, blocking, countering, and striking back with precision. The duel raged, until finally Daniel found his opening and brought the warrior down. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Daniel's breathing. It was not just a victory in combat, it was a statement that no one could deny. The trial continued for hours, stretching into the night. Daniel's group, battered and exhausted, held their ground until the final signal ended the simulation. When the dust cleared, they were still standing, though few remained. The instructors announced the results with measured voices, but the truth was clear. Daniel had led his group to victory once again. He had faced overwhelming odds, united cadets who once doubted him, and proven himself in a way that no trial could erase. Afterward, the academy was quiet. Cadets who had once mocked him now looked at him with respect, even awe. Instructors who had doubted him now spoke of his name with care, and the commanders, though silent, carried eyes that betrayed deep thought. Claire found him later, her voice low and serious. She told him that this victory was not just the end of training. It was the beginning of something greater, something far more dangerous. The galaxy had seen what a human could do, and it would not forget. That night, Daniel lay in his quarters staring at the ceiling in silence. He thought of Earth, of the people who had been forgotten, and of the future that now opened before him. He had come to the academy to train, but he had done more than that. He had shaken the order of things. He had shown that humans were not weak, not broken, but something different. And though he did not know what awaited him beyond the academy walls, he knew one thing with certainty. The galaxy would never look at his kind the same way again. Graduation day arrived at the academy, but it did not feel like a celebration. The great halls were filled with cadets, instructors, and high-ranking commanders from across the galaxy. Banners hung on the walls, lights burned bright, and the air carried a heavy silence. Everyone knew that this was more than just a ceremony. It was a gathering to see what would become of the human who had defied all expectations. Daniel stood among the rows of cadets, his posture calm, his face unreadable, but inside he felt the weight of every eye upon him. One by one, names were called. Cadets stepped forward, received their marks of graduation, and saluted the commanders. Cheers rose, applause echoed, but each sound felt muted compared to the tension building for one name. When Daniel's turn came, the hall fell silent. He stepped forward, every footstep echoing like thunder. The commanders studied him with sharp eyes, and when they handed him the insignia of graduation, the silence held. Then slowly applause began, scattered at first, then stronger, until the hall shook with the sound. Not everyone clapped. Some remained still, their faces hard, but the sound of respect was louder than the sound of resentment. After the ceremony, Daniel found Claire waiting for him. She smiled faintly, though her eyes carried worry. She told him that graduation did not mean freedom, it meant attention. The galaxy had seen him now, truly seen him, and it would not stop watching. She warned him that commanders from different fleets would compete for him, that politicians would use his name, and that enemies would seek to destroy what he represented. Daniel listened, his calm never breaking, but he understood. His journey had only just begun. Later that night, a message arrived for him. It was sealed with the mark of the highest council, a summons that no cadet had ever received before. He opened it in silence and read the words carefully. The council wanted to meet him not as a cadet but as a symbol. They wanted to question him, to test him, to decide how humans would be seen in the age to come. Daniel folded the message and placed it aside. He knew that this was the true beginning of his path. The academy, once a place of training, now felt like a memory. The halls, the arenas, the trials, all of it had been preparation for something greater. As Daniel walked through the corridors one last time, Cadet stepped aside, watching him with eyes filled with respect, fear, or wonder. Some saluted him, others whispered his name, but none ignored him. He had become the story that no one could deny, the human who had shocked everyone with combat and with leadership. When he reached the great gates of the academy, he paused. Beyond them lay a galaxy vast and uncertain, a galaxy that now carried his name like a storm waiting to break. He did not know what battles awaited, what enemies he would face, or what allies he might gain. But he knew this. He would not turn back. He had proven himself in the academy. Now he would prove himself to the galaxy. Daniel Carter stepped forward into the unknown, calm as ever, ready for whatever came next. And though the stars stretched endless before him, one truth echoed, louder than all others. Humans were no longer myths, no longer forgotten. They were here, and the galaxy would never forget it.